This afternoon, I'm on my way to visit a small eatery that first introduced Bengaluru to the delicious joys of Dilli-style Punjabi food all the way back in 1993. I love the slightly darkened flecks on the paneer, as that paneer has cooked in a hot tandoor. That paneer is soft, creamy. There's a certain joy to reaching for the food with your fingers. You know what I like about a Dilli-style seekh kebab is that dardarapan, is the grainy texture of the mince. I think next probably the tandoori chicken. Nice color from the Kashmiri chili. Quite gentle in its warmth, very moist inside. That barrah kebab is nice and juicy, with a generous wedge of meat at the end of the bone. So comforting in its flavors. I think that's a dal that you should scoop out from a katori all by itself. And this time, some of that baigan ka bharta. The smoky hit of the eggplant, meat beliram. The meat is a sort that readily slides off the bone. It's not that very slick restaurant-ish sort of a place. And why would you want a place like that? And why would you want an experience like that in a place like this? I think neighborhood eateries at a certain level are about comfort. Hi folks, welcome to the second episode of the review. I do hope you caught the debut episode featuring Ebony. In case you haven't, I'm going to link it in the description below. Please post a comment and let me know what you thought of this new format. And of course, it helps if you subscribe to the show. Whether you're new or somebody who's been on Food Lovers TV for a while, do subscribe and hit the bell notification to be informed each time we drop a new episode. So in this debut season of the review, we're featuring Bengaluru restaurants from the 90s that are still relevant today. And this afternoon, I'm on my way to Indira Nagar to visit a small eatery that first introduced Bengaluru to the delicious joys of Dilli-style Punjabi food all the way back in 1993. When Treat opened in 1993, it did so in a tiny little shop, almost nondescript, on the 80 feet road of Indira Nagar. It was very residential back then, very different from the Indira Nagar that we know of today. And it's only in the last few years that they've moved to a newer location, a little more landmark, opposite the very famous Bengaluru pub, Toit, here on 100 feet road. I guess as the area evolved, so has Treat in its choice of location. So my first visit to the eatery was about 5 years ago, the old location, when I went to film an episode of Gourmet on the Road in the wake of the pandemic. We were doing our best to help small establishments that were struggling with the uncertainties that period of life had brought upon us. So that's when I met the family, looked at some of the dishes being cooked. I'm also going to post a link to that episode of Gourmet on the Road because I think some of the dishes that I tasted then I may not be tasting today. Needless to say, I'm looking forward to a nice Dilli-style Punjabi meal. Well, when I visited Treat, it was a makeshift sort of a situation because that was just when they were emerging from the pandemic. I think we were emerging from the pandemic and it was a very difficult time then. So I think a small part of the restaurant was converted to a makeshift kitchen from where they were doing deliveries back then.
Excuse me, sir. Mango pickle?
Huh? Mango pickle?
Yes, sir. This is a chili pickle, sir.
Chili pickle?
Yes, sir. Some snacks, the namak para and matri.
Namak para and matri, fantastic. So it's nice to see that Treat has now found home in this very cozy nook of a restaurant here on 100 feet road. I don't remember the dishes that I ordered the last time around, and I have a feeling that I may end up ordering some of the same dishes, but definitely take a look at that video. You got some shorba, even a paya. It's a little too hot to have a paya shorba now. You of course have the papads, the salads, and the kebabs. I think when it comes to a Dilli-style Punjabi sort of a restaurant, I think it's mostly about the kebabs and the curries. So you got things like the makki, tikki. That sounds interesting. No self-respecting Punjabi restaurant would do without a paneer tikka. The broccoli sounds interesting too. And then of course the kukkad, the chicken. So you've got the tandoori, you've got the sabza kebab with a mint and coriander rub. The lasuni tikka, well that's a dish that we keep ordering. Although I don't visit Treat as often, this is one of those restaurants where we definitely order a lot of food from every once in a while, the times that I'm not traveling. And so we have certain orders that are standard. So even if I don't order them today, but just to give you a heads up, things like the lasuni tikka that we do, the paneer tikka that we do. They also do a biryani, but not really a dum biryani, but it's a biryani that's more or less assembled as opposed to cooked on dum, but it's quite tasty. And then speaking of the kebabs, I also love the seekh kebab that they do here. I may be quite tempted to order a seekh kebab here, because by the time you get a seekh kebab delivered home, it's that fat has congealed to a certain extent. I think I remember having a bangan ka bharta here the last time around. So also in winter they do things like the sarson ka saag. I don't know if it's there available now, but in winter they fly down the saag from the north, and it's a special here along with the makki di roti. The dal will definitely try, and some of the chicken as well, a butter chicken perhaps. Just keep it nice and standard. The mutton rogan josh too is a dish that I've tried, quite nice. But today I'm told they've got something else that they're cooking, an experimental mutton dish that may find its way to the menu, and so that's what I'm going to taste. Looking at the menu certainly has made me hungry. Try some of that namak para. It's very nice, homely sort of a touch, right? To have things like the matri or the namak para. So you go to someone's home, I like the grainy, biscuity sort of a bite of this. Definitely can taste the oma in that, the ajwain. You go to someone's home, before your main food arrives, they'll ply you with some of these short eats, which is what's nice. Well, time to make some space on the table for the kebabs that have arrived. Firstly, I've got the makki tikka. I definitely need a larger plate to straddle this food. We've got a hara tikka here, which is basically the potatoes, veggies. You've got a bit of godambi that's also stuffed in that. And then, of course, you have the paneer tikka. The non-vegetarian kebab platter is a little more weighted down, guilty of being biased. But you got the seekh here, and I'm looking forward to tasting the seekh first, because typically when I order a seekh at home, by the time it travels 45 minutes and gets to me, it's probably cooled down a bit in its vigor. And then I've got the tandoori chicken, the tandoori kukkad. We've got a haryali chicken tikka and the kali mirch tikka, which is the black pepper. I think we'll make a beginning with the corn. Always when I taste, I like to go from the mildest of flavors to something a little more stronger. Get some of that mint chutney too. Taste that kebab first, just as is. Definitely have the graininess of the lentils, whether it's a chickpea or something else, and then a bit of the spice and sour twang that hits you, biting into flecks of corn there, well rounded in its flavors. Certainly tasting a bit of the heat that also probably comes from green chili. I thought this would be a little bland, and therefore I helped myself to a bit of the pudina chutney. But I don't think this kebab needs any more flavoring. Let's reach for some of that haryali tikka. As you can see, it reveals plenty of greens within. Some carrot that I can spot. Is that some bean? Is there some mutter in that? Some peas? So only tasting the moist crunch of the beans in that. A bit pasty in its texture. Definitely the sort that will probably be elevated with that pudina chutney. That chutney, that coriander. It's a hit of the mint, along with perhaps some of that yogurt, the acidity that comes from the yogurt and the green chili that greets you right away. I want to taste that godambi just by itself. You know, when you heat godambi, when you expose it to heat, the sugars in that concentrate a wee bit, and therefore that Godambi gets a little more sweeter. Well, the barrah kebab is also here. What I want to go for next is that paneer tikka. I love the slightly darkened flecks on the paneer, as that paneer has cooked in a hot tandoor. Of course, there's some tomato, there's some capsicum too, and some onions that keep company to that paneer tikka as it's cooking in that hot tandoor. That paneer is soft, creamy. The heat of the marinade isn't the sort that has worked through all the way in. So it's got that nice balance of spice that you taste on the outside and the grainy softness of the paneer within. You can also taste the richness of the buffalo milk that probably goes into the making of this paneer, which is the reason why this paneer is nice and soft. If you want a little more spice, that's where that pudina chutney comes handy. There's some of the capsicum. It's nice and wet. There's a bit of a moist interlude between the vegetarian appetizers and moving on to the non-vegetarian kebabs. Although normally I would have tasted the chicken first, but in this case I want to go for the seekh first, because that's the kebab that suffers the most with the passage of time, because the fat that goes in to make a good seekh kebab, perhaps about 10%, along with the meat, that fat begins to congeal the moment it comes out of the tandoor. So the longer you keep it out, the more hard it becomes. There's a certain joy to reaching for the food with your fingers. I can definitely smell the aroma of the ginger garlic that's rising up to meet my nose. You know what I like about a Dilli-style seekh kebab is that dardarapan, is the grainy texture of the mince. So unlike a Lucknowi kakori or a galauti kebab, which will be very soft and also has a lot more fat, the seekh is a sort that seems a little more rustic. Therefore, I feel that the texture of the meat is a sort that's able to hold on to the flavor of the spice, yet also retain its meaty fervor. Also the lingering aromatic warmth of some of the spices that go into the making of the seekh kebab. A touch heavy on the salt, and I think that's where the lemon comes in. Tone down that salty edge a bit. I don't know if they basted some butter as they are cooking it in the tandoor. Sort of a salty edge I was tasting, which has now been completely balanced by the lemon. This kebab, you don't need the chutney, you just need to enjoy it just by itself. So good. The chaat masala, which is what I'm tasting in that onion. As opposed to ordering individual portions of the kebabs, I asked them to put together a platter so that I can taste different flavors. And this is the sort of platter that they will also put together for you when you find yourself at treat. I think next, probably the tandoori chicken, the drumstick. The chicken is moist, closer to the bone. Nice color from the Kashmiri chili. Quite gentle in its warmth, very moist inside. The drumstick is one of my favorite parts of a chicken, especially when you're cooking it in the tandoor, because you're subjecting the bird to high temperature. And the breast, of course, they'll marinate it and all of that, but still, relatively speaking, the breast probably is not as moist as the chicken legs, because that also has a lot of fat that the heat of the tandoor works magic on. What's also nice here is that the spicing is just correct. It's not over the top. There's not that excess blast of the chaat masala that you typically find in a lot of places. You're tasting the general marination that the bird has gone through, be it in the ginger garlic or perhaps the mustard oil, the cold pressed mustard oil, the kachi ghani sarson ka tel that is ideally used in a good tandoori chicken marinade. When you taste the food at these places that I taste the food at, you will taste it in a even more optimal condition, because for me, I need to make sure I get my B-rolls, we need to get our shots, etc. But you'll eat the food as soon as it comes off the tandoor. That barrah kebab is nice and juicy, with a generous wedge of meat at the end of the bone. That slight saltiness of the meat, marinated in tons of yogurt, and that yogurt has its way of working its slight acidity into the protein as that meat is marinated. I was told they marinate it more than overnight, sometimes even 24 hours, and that speaks in the softness of the meat. The meat is moist, just pink. So good. There are a couple of other tables in the restaurant at this point. I overheard their order, mostly vegetarian, and here I am, pointing every single bone, every single piece of meat, explaining its texture to the camera. I hope I don't offend them. A good barrah kebab is one that makes you want to get every bit off the bone. You know what's nice here is that the protein is cooked well, be it in the marinade and also in the tandoor, but isn't the sort that's reduced to a pasty sort of a mush. You know, sometimes they overdo the marinade a little too much, whether it's with the kachari or with the raw papaya. And if you overwork the marinade, the meat tends to become a little pasty, and I don't quite appreciate that, especially in mutton. That's an enjoyable barrah kebab. This would also be great with a good roti. You know, just do barrah kebab to some dal and some roti. I think that would be fantastic too. There's enough complexity in the flavor of that tandoori masala. That chicken kebab. The chicken, of course, has suffered the passage of time. It has cooled down a bit. This is a sabza kebab. Definitely some mint that I'm tasting in that. And I also learned from the owners that there's some capsicum paste that goes into its making. I guess that also gives that green a bit of body and that slight vegetal sort of flavor. But it's a mint that is the most apparent to the palate. I'm just trying to visualize what this would have tasted like had I tasted it hot. I took a sneak peek in the kitchen as this was being cooked in the tandoor. Get some of that tomato. To reset my palate before I make my way to that kali mirch tikka. Definitely on the other end of the spectrum in terms of flavor punch as opposed to the sabza kebab. This hits you right away with that kali mirch, the black pepper, pointed warmth. I think all the kebabs that I've tasted are equally pleasing in their own ways. In the vegetarian platter, of course, the paneer tikka is always a favorite. Between the corn tikka and the hara kebab, well, I veered a bit more towards that corn tikka, bit of that pop that corn brought in. And in the non-veg kebab platter, well, it's difficult to pick. I think if you come here and dine, definitely get the seekh. The barrah too is excellent, and so is the tandoori chicken. The sabza kebab, well, if you have somebody on the table who wants things a little mellow, but if you want something very spicy, the sort that will sting the tip of your tongue, well, then definitely it's that chicken kali mirch tikka. Well, that's a lot of food that's made its way to the table, but I ordered for it. We've got a paneer saag wala, which is with the spinach. There's a meat beliram. So this, I'm told, is not on the menu yet, but this is something that they're experimenting with. And then, of course, there's a baigan ka bharta. When you come to a Dilli-style Punjabi restaurant, you got to do that. There's a bindi masala, bendegai masala, and of course, there's the butter chicken with the cream and shards of ginger. And then, of course, there is this dal here, which I'm told is quite special, which I've tasted as well. Loaded with the cream and the butter that goes on top as garnish. I got a little bit of everything on the plate first. Only the vegetarian dishes, lest I get distracted by the meat. Tasted with some of that roti. So in the bread basket, I've got a khameri naan, I've got the roti, and I've got a pudina paratha, a flaky paratha. But what I want to get to first is some of that dal. So that dal is a combination of kali urad, there's some rajma that goes into it. So comforting in its flavors. I think that's a dal that you should scoop out from a katori all by itself. The lentils are soft, creamy. The dal is almost velvety in its texture. Place it in your mouth, and the warmth of your mouth helps the dal slither down your throat. Now for some of that paneer saag wala. A slight prick of the green chili that I wasn't expecting to be tasting in that. I was expecting more the comforting soothe of the spinach in my palate. But somewhere in that, hidden in that green, was a sliver of green chili. Also tasting the flavor depth that comes from garlic. That's the interesting thing about a dish like this. When you look at it, it seems very monochromatic in its appeal. There's a paneer, there's the greens, but when you taste it, you're detecting those nuances, whether it's the spike of the green chili or that sliver of garlic that takes your palate in a different direction. I'm quite tempted to reach for that pudina paratha, but I want to taste these flavors first against the neutral backdrop of a regular wheat roti, and this time some of that baigan ka bharta. The smoky hit of the eggplant. Well, they smoke the eggplant first in the tandoor before they pulp it to a mash. I'm also tasting the flavor, I think, of some mustard oil. I'm not sure if they use mustard oil in the making. Mustard oil is martare. I'm also tasting the deep flavor of mustard oil in that baigan ka bharta. And it's also apparent in that oily streak that you see on my plate. What's also nice here, it's not just the pasty texture of the baigan ka bharta that you're tasting. You're tasting the pop of the peas, a slight translucent sliver of the onion somewhere. So it's a dish that is complex, not just in terms of the layers of flavor that you will taste, the smoky, the slight sharp touch of that mustard oil, but you'll also taste some of those textures, whether it's that fleshy pop of the pea, slightly big voluptuous dice of the tomato, the sliver of the onion. So good. Next, for some of that bhindi masala. Slightly sweet. I don't know if there's some sugar or some jaggery that goes in, but it's got that slight sour sort of sweetness. The sour probably comes from the amchur, the dry mango powder that goes into these dishes. I'm told it also went into the vegetarian kebabs that we tasted. The bhindi still has a bit of that fleshy, slimy crunch intact. In fact, this bhindi walked into the restaurant along with me. Of course, there's a separate back entrance, but that's the nature of places like these. They're very homely in the manner in which they are run. So out here too, it's run by a gentleman, Mr. Pramod Chaudhary. Came from Delhi in the early 90s, liked the city, fell in love with it, opened Treat a couple of years later. And today it's him and his children who run the show here. So the appeal of the place, also the manner in which they do the food here, the manner in which they serve you, the hospitality is sort that's quite homely. It's not that very slick, restaurant-ish sort of a place. And why would you want a place like that? And why would you want an experience like that in a place like this? I think neighborhood eateries at a certain level are about comfort. You've gone to the place a few times, you've called for your food from the place a few times, and you know that when you visit or when you call for the food, this is what you will expect. This is what you will get. Consistent fare, no surprises. Sometimes you just want to be cradled by comfort. And I guess that's where comfort fare like this, whether it's a paneer saag wala, whether it is the baigan ka bharta or that bhindi masala, that's where dishes like these come into play. If you want it a little lighter, you can probably just ask them to avoid the generous garnish of the cream and the butter that goes on top just before they serve you. Very good. Well, after all that vegetarian, it's time to go for the meat. So we begin with the butter chicken, decorated with cream and shards of ginger. And also some of that meat beliram. I want to get a piece of the meat with the shank. Well, as I was tasting the vegetarian, my meaty fare has cooled down a bit, and therefore I've taken the liberty to order for a hot khameri roti. So that's a very puffy sort of a roti, and that's because the dough is fermented. So the khamer represents the yeast that ferments this roti, and therefore the khameri roti. That roti is nice and puffy. Something about hot bread, right? You need nothing else. So when it comes to the butter chicken, it's a tandoori chicken that cooks in that makhani gravy. So the gravy is creamy, there's a bit of sweetness that comes from the ripe tomatoes. And in the chicken, you're tasting a bit of warmth that comes not just from the tandoori masala, but also you're tasting a bit of the depth of flavor that comes from the mustard oil that the chicken is marinated in. I'm also tasting the flavor of the kasuri methi. Sometimes when you're tasting butter chicken, you find that the gravy is a little too sweet. But out here, there is a sweetness that you taste, and of course you should taste that. But there's also that gentle warmth that comes from the spices, largely from that tandoori chicken, that balance it all. And then of course the warmth of the ginger. That chicken is cooked down to the bone. And of course out here the chicken cooks twice. Actually it goes through a whole process, right? Because when it comes to tandoori chicken, you've got the first marinade, the ginger, garlic, the yogurt, and then you have the second marinade, which also involves the mustard oil, the spices, and then the cooking of the bird in the tandoor, and then lastly, when it meets that butter chicken gravy. But yet, that chicken is soft. I can taste the savory flavor of that roasted onions, which is quite apparent in that meat beliram. So I'm told the base for this is of course the browned onions, quite apparent in the depth of flavor. The butter chicken was nice, but I think once you graduate to the mutton, especially in a gravy that's as rich as this, when I say rich, it's the onion, there's no dairy in this. The flavor boost is at a different level altogether. The meat is a sort that readily slides off the bone. I'm also biting into a bit of the cardamom peel that goes into that gravy. It's a very rustic sort of a gravy, so everything that goes into that gravy, you will either see or you will taste on your palate. That piece of meat is absolutely soft. Soft and cooked to the bone. There's a bit of the sour twang that I'm tasting from the yogurt in that curry as well. So there are a couple of other dishes that I've tasted here. I think in my last review 5 years ago, I tasted the Rogan Josh, which is certainly a dish that you should try. There's also another dish called the Rada Gosh, which we order very often from here. So it's basically meat and cooked in a gravy of minced meat. So it's double the mutton maza. This preparation is more rustic. Let's see if we get lucky with that nalli. So good. And there's enough fat from the mutton that's rendered into the gravy. You can taste a bit of its gelatinous texture on your lips. I like the manner in which the meat slides off the bone rather effortlessly. Well, there were a bunch of desserts on the menu. When I inquired what's special, they said, well, the mango phirni is what is in season. But I also felt that I should have something soothing, especially after all those dishes. And that's when they said they have a malai kulfi too. A mawa malai kulfi. So one that's been fortified with dairy richness. Whenever you're in doubt about dessert, order both. And that's exactly what I've done. I think if I taste the mango, I may not be able to appreciate the nuances of that kulfi. So I think the kulfi first. There's some pistachio dust, some dried rose petals, and that lush, creamy thickness of the malai. It's like thick cream on a stick. I love the roasted flavor of the milk solids, the khova. Oh, it's superb. In fact, the flavor of this takes me back to those kulfis that we would eat as kids on those sticks on the street of Mumbai. This, I'm sure, is way better than that. If you love kulfi and malai, definitely something to get. The Mawa Malai Kulfi, supremely addictive. I guarantee you, take one bite of it, you will not feel like putting it down. But I have to, because I want to taste that mango phirni next. Although my tongue is now numb with the cold of that kulfi. I think I need some water to thaw my tongue. So good. I wonder what mango this is, what variety of mango. On my palate is still the richness of that malai. So that mango is barely making an impact on my palate. But I think the rice will certainly make a little more impact. The rice phirni. Nice and creamy. Tasting in that the texture of some nuts, maybe some almond that's crushed into that phirni. There's a bit of that grainy bite. A lot mellower, of course, as opposed to the malai kulfi. The phirni also is a sort that's a bit stodgy in its texture. I guess that's where that mango, with its moist, juicy bite, balances things out. In the malai kulfi, although there was some of that gulab petal, the rose petals, I couldn't taste it. But out here, since the canvas of the phirni is gentle, is delicate, I can certainly taste a bit of the flavor of the rose petal and that delicate crunch of the pistachio. Between the two, well, my vote goes to the malai kulfi. I love that flavor of milk, of the toasted milk. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the bill's here. And I think I've tasted enough for at least 3 or 4 or 5 people. All the dishes that I tasted, paneer tikka, the hari bari tikki, the kali mirch tikka, the sabza kebab, the tandoori chicken, the mutton seekh kebab, the barrah kebab, the saag paneer, bangan, barta, dal makhan wala, mutton, barrah chicken, that was a quarter portion, the roti, the paratha, etc. All of that for 3,000 rupees. And I think that's the sort of meal that would happily feed at least 3 or 4 people. So the portions that I ordered were smaller portions, half portions or quarter portions, and so when you come here, if you request them, they'll do that for you. So if you want to eat some authentic Dilli-style Punjabi food, I think the Treat is where you have to be at. Treat began as a neighborhood restaurant on 80 Feet Road. In the last couple of years or so, or probably a little more than that, they've moved to this location here on 100 Feet Road. The place around is of course a lot busier, but I think at its soul, at its heart, Treat is still that neighborhood restaurant where you go expecting a sense of comfort. I think that's the sort of food that Treat does. You will find all details of the dishes and the location of the restaurant in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the review. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to stay notified for the other episodes in the series. I'll see you on the next one.